Hi, this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and today I'm going to be looking at a game from the 2011 St. Louis International match, and this is Game 3 of the match between Ruslan Ponomariov of Ukraine and Hikaru Nakamura of the States. And so the game is pretty interesting. In their first game, in I guess round 1 or whatever you want to call it, Ponomariov won in a pretty similar line. Nakamura had played the King's Indian, and so seems like a pretty standard fallback weapon for him these days. And so the difference is, obviously what's going on in the position. Well, Black has conceded more or less control of the center and a little bit of space to White. And in exchange, Black is probably going to be able to play something like f5 and expand on the king side for some type of attack. So in game 1, Nakamura had played knight c6, d5, and now knight e7. And Ponomariov had played knight e1, knight d7, and bishop e3. And so f5, f3, and f4. So this was game 1. And so in this game, Nakamura lost, and it was a pretty convincing victory by Ponomariov. I think he got in some good c5 counterplay against Black's kingside attack, which didn't seem to really go anywhere. So going back, instead of knight c6, which Nakamura had played before, he played knight to a6. And so going in a completely different direction with the knight, most likely looking to put the knight on c5 in the future, and play more in the center instead of so much attacking on the king side. So here rook e1 and now c6. So Bronstein used to play openings like this all the time back in the day, and he always thought the pawn on d6 really wasn't as much of a weakness as everyone thought. If he played e takes d4 in the future, it was very tough to attack that backwards pawn at d6. And so here, knight g4 has been a pretty topical variation of late, forcing the bishop to come to g5, now f6, and bishop h4. And so a lot of times you'll see something like g5, maybe bishop g3 and h5, now h3, and knight h6. And it's a roughly balanced position. I wouldn't give an advantage to either side. Just pretty balanced position. So that's a potential plan. Instead, Nakamura played queen e8, so kind of a tricky move, maybe wanting to see what exactly is White going to set up, also reserving the option to play f5 immediately. So I think that's the real point of the move. And so now Ponomariov thought for a few minutes, and he played an interesting pawn sacrifice. He played c5. And so the idea of the pawn sacrifice is going to be pretty clear in a second. After pawn takes, now he takes on e5, so he's doubled these pawns here. They're going to be pretty weak. And after knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes a6. And so now you can see Black's pawns are absolutely terrible, but he is up a pawn, and he also has the 2 bishops. So if the position opens up a little bit, those bishops are going to be very strong. So queen d6, good centralized move, and Nakamura holds on to the pawn with c4. So yeah, he's up a pawn, and there's no concrete threats by White. So an interesting pawn stack, but I don't think objectively it's very good. And so now bishop e6, so Black kind of completes his development. And here bishop g3. And so it would have been interesting, I think, maybe if rook d8 here. I believe Ponomariov was playing queen c7. And that's going to be putting a little pressure on the a7 pawn, as well as increasing the pressure on the d file, and the pawn on e5 is still kind of hanging. So I think that's what he was planning there. So instead, Nakamura played a somewhat tricky move. He thought for a minute, and he played rook f7. So the idea is it's pretty simple, really. If he's threatening to play bishop f8 and also rook to d7 to transfer over to kick that queen out of that spot on d6. So the obvious refutation comes after bishop takes e5, which Ponomariov played in the game. So he's getting that pawn back, but he's going to have to give up an exchange. After bishop g4, obviously f3 is just not going to cut it. It's going to drop a piece. So Ponomariov, he had to part with the rook. So now after bishop f6 and bishop back to g4, White has, it seems like a pretty good attack, as Black's dark squares are so weak around his king. The problem is it's very tough for him to get this knight to penetrate, to help the bishop with the attack. And so now queen d7. So if you're being attacked, obviously a queen trade is going to make it a lot easier to defend. And now knight e4. And so if white had hurried and took, maybe even pawn takes here, and white has probably got enough compensation to draw in this position. I would imagine after bishop f5 and even bishop e7. In this position, it would seem to me, due to, white's going to pick up a pawn, maybe 2 here, this would seem most likely drawn. So after knight e4, a really nice move by Nakamura. He played bishop f5. So if he can get these, the bishops are opposite colors, so that's not good for black. He's trying to defend, and he wants to trade this bishop off. Obviously, the knight on e4 is going to really help white's attack. So bishop f5, and the idea is if white plays queen takes d7, black is going to answer rook takes d7, and all of a sudden he's going to be penetrating with the rook. And if knight c5, very simply a move like rook d5 could work, or even the direct rook d2. So both are possible, and this c pawn can also be dangerous for black. So instead, white played queen b4, and so now black achieves this trade, and rook e8, he consolidates and stops white from playing e6. So now a really nice combination by Nakamura. After 7 or 8 minutes of thought, he plays rook takes f6. And he just evaluated the position that he would, at least be drawing this queen and pawn in game, but most likely winning. And now he plays queen takes e4 almost immediately, knowing that he's going to pick up that f6 pawn, no problem. And he's just got a lot of pawns on the queen side. So he's going to be up almost 2 pawns here, at least 1 pawn. And, now you see after queen takes f6, he's also eyeing the b2 pawn with check. And so queen to b8, king f7. Now white cashes in, he grabs a pawn, but black still has a lot of pawns to take. And in the meantime, white's grabbing those. Black is going to be grabbing a bunch of white's pawns as well. So now queen to b7, trying to threaten a check here, and also defend the pawn on b2. So now black, through a series of checks, he betters the position of his king as well, and plays not necessarily his king, but he plays c3. So go ahead and advance and try to create a passed pawn on c6. Nakamura had 3 minutes here. Ponomariov had 17. So I think Ponomariov maybe moved a little bit too fast in this game, and he probably should have been able to draw this position. But I think he moved a little too fast, trying to put a lot of pressure on Nakamura. Probably a mistake, as Nakamura is one of the best blitz players in the world. So now queen c8, king d5. So the king is actually very safe in the middle. And now Ponomariov allowed a winning series of checks for black. All black has to do is trade the queens, and the c-pawn is going to roll no problem. Very easy winning endgame there. So that's what Nakamura is able to force with a series of precise checks. And now after queen g5, Ponomariov resigned in light of the fact wherever his king goes, king to f2, wherever, queen f5 check, and black is going to force a trade of queens with an easily won endgame. So very, very nice positional grind by Nakamura. Very, very good transformation of advantages in this game, going from up a pawn, then he wins an exchange, then he sacks the exchange back, but to achieve a very comfortable endgame with the queens. So a very well played game by Nakamura, and this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for listening.